Maybe these kinds of stories come to mind for you as well. I was thinking about the very first time I ever was a part of administrating the Eucharist in a worship service. The senior pastor who I was working for at the time was somebody I really idolized. I think he knew that. He had 2 Ph.D s, one in Old Testament, another one in philosophical theology, and he literally would dream in Hebrew. He spent so much time in Hebrew, he would have dreams in Hebrew. Best preacher I've ever heard in my life. Love this guy. And the very first time I served communion, I was caught up in the experience and had my eyes closed for prayer, and I opened my eyes and he was kneeling in front of me to receive communion from me as a very young and new pastor. And I was taken back by that at first, but overwhelmed with exactly what Matt just articulated, both the sense of validation of his perception of gifts and graces in my own life, but his willingness to humble himself and use his power to empower. Very powerful moment for me that has stayed with me for years. And I know all of you have those people in your life, those exemplars, and we can maybe talk more about how do we locate and foster those sorts of people in various denominational systems, United Methodist in particular. Let me just review kind of where we've been and where we want to go with the time that remains as we sort of contemplate thinking comprehensively. I think that's really what this day was all about, was how do we think comprehensively around nurture and care of pastors. And so we started out this morning talking about who is it that is coming into seminary and ministry, and then what are the implications for assessment, with particular emphasis on the move toward multiculturalism. We've been talking this afternoon about the stresses that are in ministry and what are the implications for assessment. Matt's work is, at this point, a lot about the process of becoming a pastor and a really helpful articulation of that. What are the implications for how we think about assessment and mentoring? And so we want to try to sort of land the plane, so to speak, here before dinner, really with 2 things. One is the behavioral health guidelines that are already in place, and some of you may not be aware of that, so this may be new material to you, are designed to be there as reminders and sort of accountability for everyone in ministry. But we want to specifically think about, okay, now we sort of built a case for why these are important and how might you use these in assessment. And then finally end with an update on the research that initially started with a researcher at University of Michigan named Rick DeShawn. So those of you that were here 4 years ago for this conference will remember his presentation on KSAPs, the knowledge, skills, abilities, personality characteristics, which I think will get at a little bit more of the question a couple of folks have raised, is what role does personality and temperament, sort of the raw materials that show up in your office as an MAS, what role does that play in this ecological system over time? Sort of best as we can tell with emerging research. And so that's where we're going to land before dinner. So we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, so we can rejoice in that.